Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. So welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney. And look, every now and again, we come across a topic, a conversation that really hits the mark and really gets us going and inspires us to start doing more. And look, I'm not allowed to have favorite children, but you know, all of my podcast guests are special and wonderful and create great content. But this one, this episode that I'm going to refer to really hit the mark for me personally and in our business, and was one of those things that as soon as I hit stop on the recording, the next thing I did was I booked in a strategy meeting or a reset for our whole team. And that has been the catalyst for some amazing growth in my business. So I'm really grateful to our guest today, who's come back to share more of her wisdom, and really excited. Now, if you have not listened to episode 152, which aired in December 2024, on taking from burnout to brilliance, how to transform your workplace culture, then immediately after you've listened to this episode, please do yourself a favor and go and listen to that, because it was really, for me, one of those aha moments where a lot of things fell into place, a lot of ideas came together, and it was a real good way to end the year, but also start the planning for the next year. So we were delighted to have Trudy MacDonald with us to explain how we could transform our culture, take our employees, ourselves from burnout to brilliance. And we're privileged today to have Trudy back on the microphone to help us address another of those, I guess, key issues that employers and small business owners everywhere struggle with. And we're gonna unpack one of those, I guess, delicate conversations, but I'm sure we're going to have some very wise advice on how we do unpack those delicate conversations. So, look, Trudy, she's been working extensively with boards, leaders, leadership teams over 20 years, lots of experience, is an experienced CEO, business leader, well sought after speaker, heads up the TalentCode HR team, and I think I've got that correct. I have. Yeah, so heads up TalentCode HR and has been sharing a lot of great wisdom about the employment area, culture, strategies, and really the things that you as an employer need to get right to have the best performing teams for your business. So Trudy, we're delighted to have you back on the Business Behind Your Business.
Thank you, Paul. It is such a pleasure to be back again.
Absolutely. Look, we've got a lot of great feedback from the last time we had you on the microphone. And as I shared, personally, I got a lot out of that interview myself. But we have had a lot of really great feedback about what you shared in that episode. So I encourage people, again, go back and listen to episode 152. But today we're going to unpack, I guess, a delicate topic that people like to avoid or perhaps push to somebody else's desk. And this is this whole idea of remuneration, that conversation about remuneration. So, why is it such a topic that we sort of avoid having those conversations?
Yeah, Paul, thanks so much for the introduction. And you're absolutely right. It's one of the most difficult conversations that most leaders and managers dread. And I think the same happens from the employee perspective. I mean, as an employee, if you're going to go to your manager and ask for a pay increase, it takes a lot of courage. And usually they've been brewing on that conversation for sometimes months and months on end. But I think from a leader perspective, the common scenario I hear is there's an annual salary review process. Most organizations don't have a framework or a structure for making decisions around remuneration. So they're relying on a whole lot of guesswork. And if I can define their strategy as hope, and hope's not a great strategy. Because what tends to happen is, and let me give you a simple illustration, you've looked at somebody in your team, they're a high performer, and you're thinking, okay, I know I want to give them a pay rise, but I'm not sure what their expectations are. So I'm going to come up with a number here, And maybe that number is a $5,000 increase. So we sit down and we have this really tense conversation and we say, Susie, you've been fantastic this year. I really appreciate you. I wanted to give you a $5,000 pay increase as a representation of that appreciation. And then there's this awkward silence and the leader's waiting for the response. And usually one of two things happen. One is Susie goes, oh. And there's this whole concept now that Susie was actually expecting more, but we didn't know that. And now we're thinking, my top performer, Susie, she's demotivated. Where do I go from here? Do I offer more? Do I just let it sit? So it's really uncertain. Or alternatively, Susie says, wow, I wasn't expecting anything. This is unbelievable. And as a manager, you're thinking, damn, I didn't have to give her that much money. I could have given her much less. So the reality here for many organizations is there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of guesswork, and often it doesn't land where we want it to land. But I think more importantly, and this is what I'd love to explore today, is how do we embed remuneration in our businesses of any size so that it's strategically aligned to where we want to take our business in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you've hit the nail there. It's a topic that is relevant for every business of every size. And often when we hear these conversations about remuneration, we're thinking of big companies, big employers with lots of headcount and a structured process, and you basically go through the treadmill of where you're going to go. But the reality of it is, the big proportion of employment, particularly in Australia, but similar statistics worldwide, is that 2/3 of the employment workforce is made up of businesses that are less than 200 employees, and I think probably about 45% are less than 20 employees. So, the market we're dealing with, we've got to get that conversation right. Because if you risk losing an employee over a bad discussion about remuneration, well, it has some big ramifications for your business.
Absolutely. And the cost of rehiring and retraining is significant, as we know. So when we talk about remuneration, I think one of the first overriding principles to understand is that perceived fairness is one of the most important things. So let me unpack that a little bit. If your employees perceive that they're paid fairly, what happens is we can take money off the table. And that's actually what we want to do, because if we think about the bigger picture here, we want to have an engaged workforce, we want to have a productive workforce, we want to have a great culture. Money isn't going to make all of those things happen. However, if people perceive that they're not paid fairly, it's all about the money. And I'm sure we've all been in those situations with individuals within our team that they're just focused on the money. So when I talk about perceived fairness, it is perception. And generally what happens in people's minds is they'll think about perceived fairness from three perspectives. The first is, am I paid fairly relative to the market? So relative to what I could earn doing a similar job down the road, am I paid fairly? Now, where does that data come from? It comes from the barbecue at the weekend when they have a chat to a mate, frankly. That's what happens. So it's not very reliable data. Now, that being said, more and more there's publicly available salary benchmarking information online available to everybody. So we need to be conscious that that data is out there and your team members and employees are probably looking at it. The second thing people will think about when they think about perceived fairness is internal equity. So they'll be looking at the person next to them. And if I can give you an example of me being a project manager, and the person next to me, they're also a project manager. But you know what? They show up to late work pretty consistently. They take long lunch breaks. Their projects don't hit budget. And often they have relationship issues with their client. I'm in a similar role and I'm a high performer. If I perceive that I'm paid the same as that other person, I'm going to perceive that it's not fair. It's not even that they're paid more than me. If I'm paid the same, it's not fair. So how do we manage those perceptions, particularly in an environment where we hope as a leader they're not all sharing information about their pay, but I can guarantee you they are. And if they're a millennial or they're led as Gen Z rather, it's posted on Instagram or TikTok. And with the change in the pay transparency laws, they're all talking about it. So that's the second thing that's really important to be conscious of. And the third thing that they'll take into consideration is perceived reward for the value or the effort that they're putting in. Now, more broadly within the employment landscape, most people continue to be experiencing burnout. They're feeling overworked. They feel as though they're working long hours. Work is hard for a lot of people. If people are feeling that way, often they don't feel valued and appreciated. And one of the things that they will want in return is more money because I feel as though I'm giving you a whole lot. So there's some of the macro considerations I think we need to be aware of right at the start of this whole conversation.
Yeah, so it's more than just about the money, but when conditions are not, I guess, fair, equitable, or pleasant, then it is all about the money.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So as a leader, I think one of the starting points, and this is taking back and looking at it more strategically, we need to understand the root cause behind why people may be wanting or expecting more money. And often we need to think about, do they feel valued and appreciated? And if we're not making them feel valued and appreciated through recognition and catching them doing good things and providing development opportunities, they will turn to money as a form of feeling valued and recognized. The second thing is if they don't have good role clarity and they're in this trap of busyness rather than focusing on priorities, they're going to feel as though they're giving a lot, and hence they need to be rewarded in a very tangible way for that effort that they're giving. And I think the third issue, and this is a really important macro issue, is many leaders have lost their accountability muscle. They're no longer holding people as accountable as they should have been. Subsequently, many leaders are coming to me and saying, Trudy, we can't afford to give more pay increases. Our productivity and performance as a team is less than what it's ever been, but people are expecting more. It doesn't add up. The scales are out of balance. So how do we reintroduce accountability back into our organizations so that our businesses are performing where they need to be? So we've actually got the funds to be able to pay people more.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of key things in there, and one that I'm picking up on is this idea of role clarity.
Yeah.
Being very clear about what the role encompasses, but also this accountability. Now, so in accounting and I know in a lot of other professional services, there's been a movement in the past 10 years to ditch timesheets and that way because it was seen as an inefficient way of billing. The problem is when you ditch the timesheets and you ditch the measurement, you've got no idea about how long things are taking compared to a benchmark of how long they are expected to take. So we're sort of going, well, hang on, I'm expecting you to take 2 hours to do this job. You're thinking you've got 4 hours to do this job.
Yes.
Who's right? And because you don't have the clarity, you think you've met your standard by doing it in 4 hours. I don't think you have because my standard is 2 hours, but I was never clear up the front. But also, like if we bring that accountability probably less granular but more on a holistic, what is the expectation of that role? Being upfront about that right from the beginning and saying, look, this is what we expect from you. This is how we're going to measure your performance. And then once we talk about measuring performance, well, I guess then we can have the top conversation about, well, what other incentives and rewards can we factor into your remuneration?
Yeah, Paul, you've hit on such an important point. And if I can put remuneration practices in perspective, I like to think about it as the third step in a three-part process. So let's think about step number one is defining what it means to be great for each individual in their role. And you're absolutely right. If you and your team members are not on the same page in terms of what great performance looks like, you've got no chance of aligning your remuneration to a high performance workforce or using it as a strategic lever to actually shift the organization. So when we look at those measures of performance, you're right. Often there's a qualitative measure. So how much volume are you getting through or how long does it take? There's a quality measure. And the two have to be there side by side. You can't have one without the other. I think your example is a great one. I'm delivering the quality that you want, but it takes me 4 hours. It doesn't make economic sense. You need the quality, but you need it in half the time. So that creates a really important focused conversation with your team members to solve for that problem. How can we do this more efficiently? And, that's a great opportunity for innovation and thinking about different ways of getting to the outcome. So that's step number one. What does great look like? And hence, what do we value and what are we going to reward? That's really the conversation you want to be thinking about as a leader. Step number two in that process is, how are we going to measure that? So it's one thing for your team member to know what it means to be great, but if they don't have the feedback or the insights or the data to know how they're tracking, they can't self-manage, and you can't manage them either. So what gets measured gets managed. It's a great expression, and I think that's really relevant in this regard. The third step is then remuneration. So let's think about step one, define what great looks like. Step two, let's measure what great looks like. And step number three, obviously, is let's now reward great. And what I see in a lot of organizations, whether it be with fixed remuneration, which is your base salaries, or with variable remuneration, which might be bonuses or incentives, they reward mediocrity. They don't reward great. And this is where you no longer have strategic alignment. In fact, what I see in the worst examples is organizations who are they're paying money in incentives for work that they're already paying people to do. So they're having to pay more for the job they're actually paying people to do already.
Yeah, I often have a conversation with a business owner, and I just walk away from it sort of questioning a bit, going, right, you've got this bonus structure that you pay your staff a bonus, but what is it linked to? And what's actually happened was, in a lot of these businesses, the bonus structure or the reward is not linked to any performance. It's not linked to company performance, but because they consistently paid it in the same way over a number of years, is an expectation that that's the normal part of salary. So it's not actually an incentive anymore or a bonus. It's an expected outcome.
Yes.
Where as the employee, I don't have to achieve a certain standard to make sure I get that, or I don't have to make sure the company achieves that. It's what I expect.
Yeah, Paul, you're spot on. And so that's the case with discretionary bonuses, right? So discretionary bonuses, and all that means is the team members not sure what they need to do to get that bonus. So they engage in a strategy of hope. I hope my manager likes me and is going to give me a bonus. And, you watch performance lift up in the last month of the year because we've got the recency effect there. And likewise, you've got the manager on the other hand who has no framework for making decisions. And there's a whole lot of unconscious bias that will come into that decision-making process. What happened last week? And that's going to impact my perception around how much of a bonus I'm going to give that person. So you're absolutely right. It's actually a really poor approach, but it goes a step further in terms of the unintended negative consequence. And let me just illustrate this to you. So let's assume we've got a discretionary bonus. And again, I'm a project manager. Paul, you're also a project manager. You're a high-performing project manager. I'm a poor-performing project manager, as described earlier. However, as part of the discretionary bonus scheme, and this is also a common one, that we're one team, so we're all going to share in the company profits. So everybody's going to get the same amount. End of the year, you and I both get given a $5,000 bonus. Now, remember, you're a high performer and I'm a poor performer. We both just got given $5,000. Paul, as a high performer, how are you feeling right now?
I'm not feeling terribly great. Look, I'm happy to get the bonus, but I'm disappointed that I've done more to achieve that than you have, and you're getting paid the same amount as me.
That's right. And what's that doing to your motivation right now and your sense of feeling valued and appreciated?
Well, I'm definitely not going to be putting in the same amount of effort going forward. And in fact, I might even be thinking, do I really want to stay here? Or can I look for a better job where I am going to be rewarded appropriately?
Spot on. And you're thinking, you know what? Aren't I silly working all those extra hours? I'm going to drop my performance to the level of Trudy because, you know what? The reward's the same. So the unintended negative consequence of having a poorly structured scheme or no structure, it actually demotivates your top people. And often we don't expect that. Now, me, on the other hand, as a poor performer, I'm laughing. You've just reinforced my poor behaviour. Nothing's going to change.
And of course, by reinforcing your poor behaviour, you've got no incentive to think elsewhere about, you're quite comfortable. You're going to stay there. And I'm left as the employer, so putting on my employer hat, I've now got an underperforming employee costing me more money. I've lost my high-performing employee because they got dissatisfied and left because my non-performing employee was getting paid the same amount as them. So I've lost my best talent and I've kept my worst talent, and I'm paying a higher premium.
Definition of insanity, right?
Absolutely. It doesn't make sense at all. But I think we've created this. I think many businesses have created this over time, this expectation that same pay, same job, but the performance is very different.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, so an overriding principle that I really subscribe to is that the least fair thing you can do is pay everybody the same. Now, let me exclude unionised employees who have an enterprise agreement, because legally you have to pay them the same. However, within professional services, you've got a lot of scope. So you've got scope within a salary band to pay people differentially based on their performance in terms of base salary. And you've got a huge amount of scope when it comes to variable remuneration to reward your high performers differently to the way that you reward your average performers, and certainly differently to the way that you reward your underperformers.
I'm going to put you in the hot seat here, Trudy, because I've got a couple of other curly questions. Well, they could be. So we're talking about having two employees, similar roles, similar structure, similar pay.
Yes.
But are we missing something here by expecting two employees who may be very different personalities, may have very different skill sets, to do exactly the same role? Because I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni and a lot of his work, and he's come out with the working genius model, which I'm really excited about, where it's actually identified that not everybody has the same things that get them going in the morning. And maybe those two employees doing project management, well, one gets really excited about coming up with ideas, and one just wants to get through and tick the boxes and make things happen.
Yes.
But why do we compare the same and say, well, we expect the same performance from both of you? Surely we would be better as an employer stepping back and saying, right, you're really good at ideas, you're really good at the technical stuff, work together and create a great outcome.
Yeah, Paul, you've tapped into something really powerful there. So you're spot on. And this is what more sophisticated leaders will do. They will not think about necessarily creating high-performing individuals, but rather how do we create a high-performing team? And what that means, exactly to your point, and to reflect Lencioni's work, recognising that we've all got strengths, and if we can play to those strengths, that's where we're going to perform the best, and that's in the best interest of the organisation. Now, I think that the practical reality here is that for most roles, there's a core set of responsibilities that you need to be able to deliver on, and there's a core set of outcomes that you need to be able to deliver. However, around that, and if you can think about concentric circles, there's going to be some things where there's flexibility to say, you know what, that's not a strength of mine. Maybe you could take on that. And this is something that I love doing and I'm passionate about. Maybe I can do more of that. So when it comes to job descriptions, I really like the concept of job crafting. And what that means is we're not going to completely change the role, but we're going to craft that job to fit the strengths of the individual. And this is where I think at a team level, you can have some really powerful conversations around what do I love, what do I loathe, and how does that compare to what you love and loathe within your job? And let's see how collectively we can deliver on what this team needs to deliver to be successful for the organisation.
Absolutely. And look, I'm going to touch on some of my personal experience here in this approach to actually working out, crafting that position. So traditionally, So in an accounting background, traditionally you would say, right, I need an accountant with this level of experience and this number of years of experience, and that they're going to come in and perform all of these roles. But we actually turned that on its head a bit with our team meeting that came out from doing a strategic reset. Go back to episode 152 and have another listen to that. But we actually got the whole team involved to identify what are the skill gaps that we need addressed in our business, and let's design the roles that we expect that we need to fill around the skills that we need, the services we need to deliver. And what was really helpful was we identified that not one person is going to meet all of those requirements. So if we hire one person, right from the beginning, we're going to know that, okay, they don't have the skills to deliver X, Y, and Z, but they're really good at A, B, and C. And we need A, B, C, and that's what they're going to focus on. But we're not going to expect them to do X, Y, Z. We're going to fill that need of or being able to deliver X, Y, Z with a different resource and let the person do A, B, C exceptionally well. And that's been a real, I guess, eye-opener for us, and getting the team involvement and helping them identify who do we need and what do they need to bring to the table to make us all work more efficiently and productively together. It's been a bit of a lift for me, and look, it's given a bit of a, I guess, it's lit the fire, it's lit the excitement in the office, and we're moving forward because there's a ownership of the whole process, ownership of who's going to do what.
Yes.
And we're really looking forward to moving forward with having redesigned the roles for our business around the outcomes that we expect, not just this predisposed, get this person comes in and they can do the whole lot. That's not going to happen for us.
I think that's great, Paul. Thanks for sharing that example. And if I leverage your example, X, Y, Z, those other things may be resourced through outsourcing, through contracting, through bringing somebody in 2 days a week. So it can actually often end up being a more affordable option than bringing in another full-time person, trying to jam them into the square peg into the round hole scenario and have suboptimal performance because they're not great at all of the things that you need.
Yeah. And look, that's exactly the approach that we took, is that we identified that, okay, we need X, Y, Z, but it's not a full-time role at this stage.
Yeah.
So we're going to hire somebody part-time for this X, Y, Z, but we need somebody full-time to do A, B, C. And, we're moving ahead with that process, kicking some goals. So we're pretty excited.
Yeah. So if we tie this back to remuneration, I think that illustration is wonderful, because what we're talking about here is being really clear on what great looks like for an individual, and that may mean playing to their strengths. But then asking yourself, what does great look like for the team? And for your listeners who are in larger organizations, there may be multiple teams or multiple departments. So getting really clear on that at a team level. And then what does great look like for the organization or for the business? Now, if you can get clarity around that and then move to the second stage, which is measuring those things and being really transparent with them so everybody knows how we're tracking, then we can start to design reward strategies around those things. So if I just talk about incentive schemes for a moment, and I think this is a really logical segue, when you design incentive schemes, rather than having a discretionary bonus at the end of the year, let's be really clear and deliberate around it. So part of the incentive may be linked to company performance and what great looks like for the company. Part of the scheme may be linked to team performance and what great looks like for the team. And that's going to encourage the behaviors of collaboration and support and sharing. And then what does great look like for the individual? And that's going to focus on the elements that they've got key responsibilities for. And that's one of the keys to success when you design incentive schemes. Look at the different elements, because what I see, and this is a common mistake to be aware of, is often incentive schemes are designed without thinking through the unintended negative consequences. So let me give you a practical example. An incentive scheme may be based on a combination of company performance and individual performance. So if the company hits profit targets and you hit your goals, here's some money. Well, I start the year with a clear understanding of what my goals are and what my incentive is based on. That all sounds good in theory. However, what we didn't realize is that for the other teams in the organization who have got their own goals, they're going to depend on me to help them deliver some of their goals. And likewise, I need to depend on them. However, if the incentive scheme only focuses me in on my goals, what do you think that's going to do behaviourally? It means I'm going to deprioritise any requests for help from my colleagues. And the broader organisational implication is we've got silos, we've got tension, we've got conflict, and we're not delivering on the organisational goals because we're not actually working as a team. So we've got to be really careful from a design perspective that we can think about the broader ecosystem of how your business needs to function.
Yeah. So not just designing a reward scheme around just what the company outcome is or specific individuals, because you've got that conflict in there.
Yes.
Is money the only reward that we need to consider?
Yeah, it's a great question. So back to my earlier point, if you get money right, we take it off the table, and there's a whole range of other things. What I like to think about is the concept of total rewards. And what total rewards mean is for somebody who's working in your business or that you're trying to attract to work in your business, what's the whole package of everything that they have access to that will be considered as a reward for them? And it's useful to categorize that into 4 key areas. So the first area is around development opportunities. So this isn't necessarily about promotion, but it is that is one element to it. It's also about learning. It's about not stagnating. It's building both technical and professional and leadership capabilities. It's mentoring. It's all of that together. The second category is about culture. And you can think about that as, what does it feel like when I show up to work every day? Do I feel as though I'm part of a team, that I'm valued, that it's collaborative, that it's psychologically safe? Or is it a tense environment where I don't feel a sense of belonging, I don't have a voice? Very different cultures. And that means something to people. It absolutely does. The third category is benefits. And the way to think about benefits is if you're part of the team, you get access to them, not linked to performance in any way. So free lunches, car parks, gym memberships, charity days, morning teas, you name it. It's all there. And then the fourth category is compensation. So we can think about fixed remuneration, base salaries, and we can think about variable remuneration, incentives, and bonuses. So let's take all of that collectively. Some of those things are considered non-financial rewards. Some of them are financial. Here's what the research tells us. If you want to maximize the performance and the productivity of your people, the number one thing that's going to have the biggest difference, make the biggest difference, is development opportunities. People knowing that you're investing in their future capabilities and their growth, and that's giving them future earning potential. That's number one. Closely followed by number 2, which is culture. What does it feel like? Do I feel valued? And is this a great culture that I want to be part of? They're the 2 biggest things. It's not all about the money. Now, a quick word on benefits. We've got to be really careful with benefits. They are great for attracting people to your organization. And I think, for many of us over the years, we've heard about the Google culture and all the benefits at Google. You get slippery dips, you get free car parks, you get your hair cut in the premises, and this is very American, obviously. Great for attracting people. And you can imagine why, somebody would go, wow, what a cool place to work. The problem is once you start to work in an organization with lots of benefits, they become an entitlement very quickly, and they have no direct correlation to performance or productivity. Even worse, once benefits are in place, you can't take them away. It becomes a disincentive. So with all of those things, I think what's really important to understand, and the takeaway is, we need to get the money right so people perceive that it's fair, get it off the table, and then let's focus on development and let's focus on culture.
Absolutely. So I think the key learning for me is the money is the issue when you haven't got the team, the culture, the development in place. I think that, if you don't focus on those aspects of your business, then money's always going to be the issue for your employees.
It's always going to be the issue, but it's also about perceived fairness. So let me just dig into that a little bit, because I think, as I spoke about at the start, we understand why people perceive things are not fair, but what can we do about it? I think that's really the question. So the first is, I strongly recommend you have a remuneration framework in place. And what that means really practically is, what is your criteria for making decisions around base salary increases every year? And I generally recommend there's 4 criteria that you consider. The first is, has the person's role changed in a way that means that they're actually doing a different role, even though the title may not have changed? Number 2 is, are there any legislative changes? And what's the market doing more broadly? So what that means is you need to get your hands on salary benchmarking data. And this is something that our organisation does to help organisations. So you can benchmark your salaries and know how you're paying. Criteria number 3 is, how has the individual performed in their role? And criteria number 4 is, what can we afford as an organisation? Now, with that criteria, it's so important that you communicate that to your employees, because otherwise their perception will be, if I feel that I've worked hard, I am hence entitled to a pay increase. And it's not that simple. So we may be in an environment where people have worked incredibly hard, but they haven't delivered on the outcomes. We may be in an environment where they have delivered on the outcomes, but market rates have actually gone backwards. You may be in a position where people are working really hard, but your profitability has put you into a deficit position that year. You can't afford it. So there's so many variables here, and we need to introduce that into our decision making, but we need to share that with our team members as well.
And look, I think that's all great wisdom, great advice. But a lot of business owners will be sitting here listening, or running, listening, driving, and they'll be thinking, that's great. Where do I get started with doing this? Can I do this myself?
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't think I've got the skills to do it. Who do I reach out to? And I'm going to recommend yourself. I'm going to recommend Trudy, because if you've been listening all this way through, you would have known that there's some great value and great advice there. And I think there's more to it, and there are more ways that Trudy can help you with this whole idea of remuneration and getting the best outcomes for not just for your employees, but for your business as well.
Yeah. So, Paul, absolutely. My team and I, we specialise in this, and we can help you. Salary benchmarking in itself is an art and a science. The science is getting your hands on the most reliable salary benchmarking data. So what do we need to consider? That it's not just the job title, it's what are people actually doing? Where are they located? What's the size of the business that they're working in? How many employees do you have? If you're a business that has 20 employees, you don't want to benchmark yourself against one of the ASX 100. It's not going to make sense. So you need to get your information on that data. And then the art is, what do we do with that? How do we bring that into a framework? So we can certainly help you with that. For many of you, you may be able to access that information through your industry associations. Often they will have a salary benchmarking report, so check that out if you haven't already. The other thing that you can do is get online, and a lot of the recruitment agencies will publish for free salary benchmarking surveys. Now, buyer beware, it is free data, and what it represents is the value of jobs that they have placed in the last 12 months. That doesn't necessarily reflect what employers are actually paying their people, the bulk of their workforce. So it is going to be inflated, and it's important that you're aware of that, especially if your team members come to you and say, here's this survey, I should be paid 100 grand a year, I'm only paid 80. It may not actually reflect what most employers are paying their people. I think that the other part to this where we can help you is strategically looking at how you can combine fixed remuneration with incentives. Now, incentives are not right for every business nor every role. However, for those that they are, strategically what it means is that you can keep your fixed costs, your base salaries, as low as possible but fair, and create the upside through incentives. Now, this is strategically really important. And if I can just illustrate quickly an example of what I often see. So you've got a high performer in your team. So what happens? We come around to the annual salary review and we pay them more money because we want to reward them and we want to keep them. Next year, they're a high performer. Great. They're expecting another increase. They're adding value. I'm going to pay them some more. And that happens year after year after year. Now, what happens over time is you may actually be paying them well above market. In fact, so far above market that they would not be able to earn that money anywhere else. Now, that's all good while they're adding a huge amount of value to your business. You can justify it. However, what happens down the track when the business outgrows them or their life situation changes and they lose their mojo a little bit? What happens is you're stuck with an underperforming team member who's paid well above market and they're not going anywhere. You are stuck with them because no one's going to pay them that kind of money. So we want to mitigate against that situation. The better approach, pay them well within the required salary band for their job, give them plenty of upside in variable, but they need to be performing every year in order to earn that.
Some great advice there. Thank you, Trudy. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure. And again, I've got a lot out of this personally. I know our listeners will get a lot out of it. But if they're looking for more answers, the best place to go would be to talentcodehr.com.au website and get in touch with Trudy and her team for some assistance there because, like you said, it's not just about science. There is some art to it. And as a business owner, generally that's not your skill. So hire the right person for the right job and get the best outcomes. Trudy, again, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. Delighted to have you back and encourage our listeners. Again, if you haven't already checked out our earlier episode with Trudy, please do so. It's episode 152. And as always, the show notes and links to resources, they'll be published on the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website. So thank you for listening. And again, thank you, Trudy.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit and send in your burning questions because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes along with show notes, transcripts and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed and keep building the business of your dreams.